6:01, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Tuesday, March 19th, meeting of the Marquette City Planning Commission. We'll go ahead and start with roll call.
Commissioner Rayner, present.
Commissioner Freehold, present.
Commissioner Clay, present.
Commissioner Clay is present.
And Chair Sarah Middlefeld is here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
All right.
And anyone have any comments or additions, changes to the minutes of February 6th? And can someone approve by consensus? Okay, we'll move forward. Anyone have any conflict of interest in having special land permits today? So I don't think this applies, but usually, that way? No. Okay, so no public hearings. Number 2 on the agenda, are there any citizens wishing to address the commission on agenda items? All right, seeing none. We have no old business, so we'll go ahead to agenda item number 4, new business. We have, first item is the election of officers. And Dave, I'm told that there a formal process, or do you want to?
Well, what you normally do is, since we're probably going to have some transition, is have somebody nominate first a chair, or multiple people nominate a chair, and then the rest
I move that we nominate Sarah as chair.
second that.
Are there any other nominations? Can we vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor of that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and throw it around. Thank you guys. Thank you for the vote, I appreciate that. All right, so vice chair. I would put forth a recommendation of Commissioner Clay. Would you say vice chair?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, all in favor for Commissioner Clay as vice chair?
Aye.
Congratulations. All right, that was easy. Okay, moving on to the next presentation from the one and only, the City of Marquette Arts and Culture Vision Manager will talk to us about culture.
Very exciting. Usually when I don't ever really present in here, it's always committee chairs that present up here and I listen, so it's my first time. It's exciting. So thanks for having me. I don't know if that can get into slideshow, so it's up the entire screen. I don't know if you, because it's a PDF, not a present. So, see it, but yeah, I can get on the screen. So just a little bit about myself while we're looking at that. So my name is Tina Warren and I work for the city. I work with community services, which is senior services, parks and recreation, and arts and culture. John Swenson is my director who represents arts and culture and senior services and parks for all our purposes. I've been here for about 11 years. I have a background. My grandparents immigrated to Nagani in the 50s from Estonia, and it's actually Marquette, a soldier in World War II, that sponsored them in Marquette. So the first chance as an adult that I got to live in a place where I've been visiting my entire life, I would do it, and that was 19 years ago, and I'm glad I made that decision so that I get to work in the field of arts and culture. My background's in museum education, museum curation, and performance and arts administration. So I got the job in Marquette, one job, it's at the university to do that. Our office, the city of Marquette, I'm sorry, I'm making it difficult for you guys. You don't need to.
Oh, wait.
There we go.
Sorry, it's a new program.
So I'm here to talk about the cultural trail. And as you know, a cultural trail is just a path that's making connections with landmarks and cultural heritage, landscapes, and the cultural heritage trail is a really good example of a local cultural trail. Next slide, please. Represent Office of Arts and Culture. For those of you that don't know, there's been an Office of Arts and Culture with the city since 1991. That's how important arts and culture has been to our community. And it was in 2000, before I lived here, that they relocated to the library. They were part of an expansion program there. So when I got into this position, there was youth theater, there was lots of programming, it was a programming arts job. We went through a master planning process and we transitioned from a programming center to one of capacity building. Basically, my boss at the time, Carl Zucker, is like, you don't have a background in economic development or community development, or can you do what this new master plan says? I'm like, well, I'm good to go. It doesn't work out. You can do what you want. So that was 10 years ago now, this arts and culture master plan, which is we follow it to the T. And it really, we do a lot of, we've done public art policy. We have a vibrant public art program. We advocate for the arts and culture sector. We founded the Upper Peninsula Arts and Culture Alliance, which is now re-granted for the MEBC across the UP. We started things like, we do capacity building, started things like First Thursdays, Halloween Spectacle, Art Week, placemaking events, which we're really pushing back from. But also capital projects. The cultural trail, I would say, is the biggest kind of cultural planning project that we've been involved in. So lots of different types of things. And next slide. And this kind of just shows you kind of our impact, whether it's education, especially placemaking, quality of life for residents, the Be Well mural there. We help them find the artist, find the grant funding, which is an Art Place funding, help them get a matching MEBC grant to make that nationally renowned artist, get them to come to Marquette. And work with Travel Marquette a lot, and also a lot of the creative sector in the local business area. Next slide, please. But we're here to talk about the cultural trail, and this is where it all started. I am a year and a half on the job, 2 years in the job, and the Beautification and Preservation Committee wants to restore this statue that I know nothing about. And I learned a lot, but their question to the city was, this is your most valuable piece of public art, and why don't you take care of it? What's the policy that you have in place? And we had none. So basically, this project not only kind of helped us to restore the statue, but it brought a lot of questions to the city about how do we take care of public art? Where is other public art? Do we have any other public art? And for me, it was the entire seat of the cultural trail. Next slide. You can see them restoring, beautification, pay for that restoration, and upon the full restoration, they would give it back to the city. They took it, the ownership from the city, while they restored it. That was how they figured out how to do that. It's too complicated. So we restored the statue, and next. And just like these projects happen, they're a ripple effect, right? Now what's the next thing? So restoring the statue brought accessibility issues to the park. This is an old historic park. They are like little tiny flagstone pathways, not easy to get to, but yet a very important park for many, many groups. Civic groups like Lions Club, Lake Superior Art Association had the first Art in the Rocks. And important to see a lot of dignitaries from the founding fathers getting their picture taken at that park. The first city band concert was at that park. So lots of important history. But the statue at its center, our city namesake, you couldn't get to it, especially in a wheelchair or if you had any mobility issues. So if you ever go up there, people call it the path to nowhere because it doesn't go all the way around. It doesn't go around because it was really meant just to get up to see the sign and see the statue up close. If we were to make it go all the way around, we would have disrupted the rock that it's sitting on. So that was an accessibility project that actually started in about 2014. The ribbon cutting was 2018, and my mentor, Carl Zuber, that brought me on for that project. When we started, he wasn't a big arts and culture fan at the time. When we left, we ended it, he had ALS, and he became the biggest arts and culture millionaire advocate that I know. Next slide. And when we were up there looking at that landscape, I was so excited. I'm like, look at this view. Yeah, the hotel's there, but look how gorgeous this view is. Where are all our benches gonna, face? Where are the walkways gonna face? And he's like, yeah, that's not gonna be there. There's a Marquette One place going on. I'm like, what? Next slide. And when we opened, that was what we saw. So the viewscape was changing. And from a person with a background in history, wow, our landscape is changing very fast. Even in my short 10 years of living in Marquette, it was changing fast. How do we tell the story? So, I used to be a museum educator, taking people on walking tours in Marquette. It's a lot more difficult to tell your story when the landscape is changing so fast. So I asked permission of the city to go on a tour of cultural trails. Indianapolis, Duluth, Minneapolis. How people are interpreting the trails. Next slide. That's the last remaining viewscape. Viewscapes are really important to me as a resident here and now as a person that's in arts and culture, because aesthetics, it's all about design and aesthetics for me. So that's why we placed Carl Zuber's overlook there. That's a memorial to him. And I quickly found on my phone the email that he sent me, so I could read you what he wrote to me on his machine. He wasn't speaking at the time. This is a gathering place, a place to pause in life and reflect and meditate. Oh, this is a gateway. Sorry, a gateway, a place to pause in life and reflect and meditate. It is a place where aged eyes see the past and the imaginative child's eyes see the future. It is a portal which connects nature and people's souls. It's in fact really the location where it all began. And at the time, so much has happened. I feel like was just looking into the future of all the things that will get to come in that space. But that's our remaining viewscape. Next slide. And then after about 2019, the park opened in 2018, the City Commission adopted a public art policy, which is really slowly changing the face of Marquette. Because when you have public art, like the canoe entrance that Ryan Bryack did before 10 Steel to the park, that's not shown there, but other things start happening in the community, right? Evolve and Be Involved, Stay Involved was installed during COVID. And that was a response to Black Lives Matter. The man who likely owned the space did that mural to represent their marriage and their children. Actually, someone just moved to Marquette and said, I moved to Marquette when I saw that mural, that I felt that I was welcomed here. So I thought that was pretty neat. But between the flowers, there's more activities. We're having events up at the statue. That whole area is slowly being activated, which made us realize, wow, what areas need help. Next slide. So the Cultural Trail Project, what is it? This is stuff that we write in all of our grant requests. This project will honor and preserve Marquette's diverse history and cultural heritage using elevated public space design, public art, interpretive signage along the 7-mile ADA accessible city multi-use pathway from the Carp River to Crest Isle. We already have a bike path, right? So when I was looking at other cities that were starting cultural trails, they were raising millions and millions so they could have a path. The Art Heritage Trail also had that problem to get maybe paved path. We have a paved path. We have this incredible history on this lakeshore, so let's tell it. So that was the concept. Next slide. The impacts, so this is what we did a lot of research. I actually had a class at NMU with human-centered performance, I think they're called, do some research on cultural trails and their impacts, and talk to a lot of cities, planning commissions that were doing cultural trails. And this is what they found. Historical insight of the community, economic growth, exploration of a recreation, it really encourages it, right? Just like Russell Sawyer said, now you have things to walk to. You've got more destinations. Preserves the lakeshore for public access, cultural education, empowers and instills civic pride, environmental stewardship, encourages sustainable development, and enriches the city's public art program. So I had to put together the partners. In about 2019, I started right before COVID interviewing everybody. Huguenot Bay Indian Community, Marquette Regional History Center, Maritime, Superior Watershed Partnership, Northern Michigan University, and a lot of other individuals, people, all that interact, like Superior Theater, that have places along the shoreline, people that do things on a regular basis, organizations along the shoreline, to say, what would a project like this mean to you? Got lots of different answers, and I started drafting funding proposals. Next slide. So the funding proposal, the first one we got was Michigan Native American Heritage Fund. That was during COVID, and $57,000. And that little bit of money leveraged all the rest. National Endowment for the Arts, our town grant. First time we didn't get it. Second time, I worked with Superior Watershed Partnership. They were able to bring the tribe in, but they brought the environmental component in. And because of the lake restoration project and the component with the partnership with the KBIC, we were funded. Over 500 people applied, and about 30 cities got it, 100,000. So not a lot in your world of grant writing, but in ours, I did a dance. I was flicking my heels. It was a really big deal. And then from that, it started unfolding, right? Michigan Economic Development, over, almost over a half. DNR Spark Grant, Watershed Partnership. Actually, that $30,000 was from another grant that they received that they needed to do interpretation along the shoreline. So now your partners are engaged. We're leveraging grant funding, and it's becoming a bigger project. The Rapid Spark Grant funding, as you know, is going towards the trailhead and the new cultural space. Right now, we're hidden in the lower level of the Peter White Public Library. And remember, we're not doing programming anymore. We're working with capacity of the creative sector. So people sometimes find us, but not usually find us. So that's going to solve that problem. And this would not be happening, obviously, with our city, really being fiscally conservative and all the things that we are in need of. It was the grant funding that's making this happen. Public Art Commission, our very own Public Art Commission, gave matching $30,000, and many others. Next slide. So the partners, we started a meeting, and where are we going to put this interpretation? First, we're like, we'll have signs everywhere. We had all these big visions, and we narrowed it down to about 8 sites. And we found an old Hinsdale map, surveying map, and if you look at the triangles, they represent Anishinaabe villages that were here. But and I know that there is almost none, representation of the history of the Anishinaabe people in Marquette outside of the museum and university school walls. You have to go somewhere like a museum to learn about it. You could not walk along the lake shore and learn about those people and their presence here. So we started looking at where those locations were, and they were all in the areas that we came to. The harbor, Safe Harbor, the Carp River, Whetstone Creek, the Lighthouse area, Snagging Point, the Dead River, Presque Isle, all the areas that we've had major industry and we also have come to enjoy and love and fish and use in the same areas. So there's this connection. And we quickly realized that water is that connection for all of us. And that would be the theme of the trail. Next slide. So there are the trail sites. We were in a community development meeting and we talked about it being the spine of this community. And you can imagine that in different phases that there'll be different routes or different trails leading into the city. If it's the history center, Northern Michigan University, the hospital, whatever that might be. But there can be many, many more future trails and opportunities to explore the community. And if you have any questions, just please shout out at any point. Next slide, please. So we hired, we had to do an RFP, and we looked for people that could do an interpretive design project. This is not, and I do get a lot of flack about it, like where are the signs with 2 posts and signs that we're used to when we see interpretive signs. But this was an art grant, right? So it's a design grant. And this sign was going to be a little bit more than 2 posts in the ground. It needed to be landscape design. It needed to integrate original local artwork into the sign. It needed to integrate poetry and find really creative ways of telling stories. So we had to do quite a bit of research to find out who does that, who knows how to do that. And it was a very competitive selection process. This group out of St. Paul, Minnesota, Urban Ecosystems, has worked with a lot of tribal nations, which we really, really liked. They had really great experience working with tribal nations, working with brownfield and public art and redevelopment, and a lot of water, and also landscape. Really approaching it from a landscape perspective, not just the built hardscape. More what was around it, the environment around it. So we really liked them. Next one. So they've come up here, and we began talking about this trail. And one of the things that will be really important for this process is developing a trail branding and storytelling. And I just wanted to show an example from Memphis Heritage Trail for the possibilities that this project can have, that it's kind of choose your own adventure. In some cities you can go and you can learn about national things that have happened in history throughout time, but from a local perspective. So we can do the same here. If you're coming to Marquette, you could learn about the women's movement in history by going on this trail. You could learn about the Civil War or the Industrial Revolution by going on this trail. Architecture, iron ore industry, the Anishinaabe history. So there's a lot of potential of how we can take people and shape and curate the trail. Next slide. So this is how we're approaching it, and this is not my particular slide, this is Urban Ecosystems. And I like how they laid out traditional interpretation, which is, okay, you got an overarching message, it's water, how we all connect with the water, and now we're gonna pick some stories. Oh, we're picking Gaines Rock, Gaines family, Harlow, Chickamauga. We'll pick some stories, but no matter how many stories we pick, we're so limited on space on sign. And those stories, many of them are going to get, reach the cutting room floor. We're just not going to make it. So how can we make sure that this is inclusive and we tell everybody's stories, and not just the famous stories, but make it more like a living library? So scrap that one and go to the next one. So a little bit more innovative interpretation, and that's right up our alley as an Arts and Culture office. So again, our overarching goal is to see how water can shape us over time. But we can have unlimited stories. Nothing has to go to the cutting room floor because we're going to have many, many different ways of telling those stories. We have technology now. We have QR codes. We have websites. We have things that can be written on signs. We have different ways of telling stories through artwork, images, but also the spaces themselves and the natural environment. You can see and learn a lot by just looking at the old relics that we have. If it's something from the bridge or old pilings from the streetcar bridge, if it's a bridge by the Carp River or the Ore Dock, those tell a story too. And so then the physical, what we're going to be ending up with is looking at all of these ways to tell the story, but you'll actually see a story marker, an identifying place. But this is a pause point to stop and learn. This particular grant is paying for this narrative, the initial collection of these stories, how we're going to tell them, and then the story marker. They're also going to provide kind of a phase 2. Here's the story marker, but this is what we suggest you do with the landscape, to make it more of an inviting space for people to come visit and share. That's not included in the budget. Next slide. But it's more challenging than I thought embarking on this project. You see the city very different eyes than I see the city, and that's a really beautiful marriage between what you do and what I do. And I was starting to look at this, this most important, I would say, one of the most important sites is the Marquette River. This is the largest indigenous village in UP at one point here in Marquette. And because of that, it's a very sacred area. And it was here because of the Great Suckerfish River. And it was also the location for back by the prison where there was a large garden, largest in the UP. And this is where during the travel, the people that come from summer camps to winter camps would go to plant their garden. And I didn't know this. In fact, people kept asking me about the charcoal kiln visitors. And they were like, is that something that made it obelisk or what is that? Had we known at that time, we just didn't know how important this area was historically to the Anishinaabe people. So we started exploring this area. Next slide. You can see here's an old map. The large garden is somewhere on this map, I think, kind of towards the end of it, but it just shows you that overlay of history and what this was. And it is kind of ironic that a lot of prisons, or actually some poetry we found about prisons overlaying indigenous gardens in the United States. We're not the first time that's happened, which I thought was really interesting. Next slide. But this is really kind of an exciting, at first I'm like, oh, it's an eyesore. It's also been described as a trauma-scape by local indigenous people that live here. And I can see why. You've got a highway, you've got an old train bridge, you've got the sewer lines, you've got a highway bike path there, you've got a charcoal kiln, you've got snowmobilers, and it's a really complicated space. So how do we tell its story? That also allows for some really exciting stories. Stories of how we take care of our water. How the city is really ahead of their time when it comes to taking care of our wastewater. We can talk about fish and fishing and recreation. We can talk about the charcoal kilns and the use of lumber and how that changed the landscape. We can talk about the indigenous fishing practices. There's so many stories to tell, but how do we tell it? One of the things that we are looking at is when you go by the charcoal kiln, you can't hear the river. As soon as you go close to the bridge there, the river, you can hear it. So we also wanted to find creative ways that we can draw people to the river. This is one of those complicated projects that might need more than a story pulled down the line. How do we give people access to that river? Next slide. And here's some interesting shots as we're kind of exploring. This is an easy task, and I think the story marker here will be the very beginning of a longer project. But this would be an example of a project where community development, engineering, and arts and culture can work really closely together. I love the picture, we took these pictures actually, of the older couple there, they're fishing, and they had to kind of make their way down the hill. But people fish all over that place. They find their way. How do we make it accessible for everybody? Just more pictures and possibilities of where you could bring people to be closer to the water to see it, and to look up the river, and then you can kind of motion towards that story that happens up the river. It's a beautiful space. And so it's a nice case study, right? The water treatment plant and the floodplains. Next slide. Keep going. Some of the designs are the designs that we'll be using, that we've hired local artists to make. So we've done a lot of stakeholder engagement. If you've heard of Art Week, the last 2 Art Weeks, we've done a lot of talking to the community in those spaces to hear their stories. Presque Isle is the best place to hear people's stories. Father Marquette, there were some really interesting stories up there. All the teenage stories in the 60s and the 70s, and all the mischief, and and all the stories count. It was pretty exciting. But our recent stakeholder engagement here, Urban Ecosystems met with 17 groups, 56 people, 35 organizations. We put 10 hours a day, we listened to people, talk for 4 days, and we learned an awful lot. And it was very interesting because the groups were able just to kind of connect with each other and share stories. And I'll be sending out all of you kind of a write-up of all of that information to show you what was still, some of the common themes. One of the plans is they will be coming back in May to present to you the consultants. I'm assuming that you'll maybe, hopefully tonight, have feedback from me on this, but they want to present to you and the city commission, this is where we are so far. This is what we found. Are we on the right track? Does this sound good to you? Is this out of our purview? Those kind of questions. And then they'll go back and then present to the public their findings and conceptual drawings in June during our week. Next slide. So how does this connect to the city master plan? One thing I've been very aware of is that master plans, I feel, are really worthy of our time, and they really do, if done well, become a roadmap for what you do. But I realize the arts and culture master plan, especially the last 10 years, you don't operate alone. We have to connect with other master plans, if it's parks or the city's master plan. So this is where in bold, we connect. And this project connects with some of your guiding principles with the master plan. Stewardship of the natural assets, access to non-motorized. We're talking about walkability, walking from, if it's in our neighborhoods or along the trail. Preserving our entire history. And we can say history, but I also want to talk about just celebrating our culture, celebrating our living history. Because we can tell the history, for example, I've been already told by Anishinaabe community, we talk about it, we need to tell that history. But more than that, we need to let people know there's a group of people living here that identify with that culture and are doing incredible things. And this isn't just the indigenous history, but we're also talking about the immigrant history and the history of all of those early settlers. Vibrancy is huge. Placemaking is huge, recreation and connection between neighborhoods. Next slide. So this is kind of an example of how our office has already begun to preserve history, our entire history. The old Presque-Isle sign is still at the Art Center if you want to come check it out. It's really actually very beautiful. But when it was falling apart and it needed to be replaced, we wanted to look for an artist that identified as being Anishinaabe. In the picture, Sherry Lewisfoot Aldridge is a member of KBIC, and she's a phenomenal artist. We selected her. And it was interesting, this is an example of people need to tell their own history. If you look at the old sign, the canoe is inside out. You wouldn't have the white birch bark on the outside. The stereotypical, very stoic Indian man is in the canoe, so that's a little bit of a stereotype. And then you look at the slide that Sherry did, and it's her mother gathering blueberries. And it's a very different scene. The water is very vibrant. It's very warm. And there's the original right there. And you can see around it, there's the trees, there's the planting that would be really important to them, the different berries. It tells a much different story than the first one because it comes from a very, very personal place, which kind of just shows you when you're narrating a story, it's important to have the person telling the story where the story is coming from. Next slide. We'll also have some dual language. We don't have a lot of space on signs, so now we're looking at some phrases and words. So there could be Finnish words. There will be Anishinaabe words. Because for me, I think that's also a full circle, right? We've gone from an industrial harbor here. We started pristine wilderness, we extracted the resources, and there's something about going back to greening our lakeshore, going back to recreation, and moving forward sustainably. We'll always have development and probably mining, but how do we move forward sustainably? And so there's this kind of full circle. And I'm excited to kind of learn about the traditional knowledge, Anishinaabe or environmental knowledge, and lessons that culture can teach us, and kind of sharing that culture as we move forward together. Next slide. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this. We have the Public Art Commission, and they really wanted their very first sculpture, their most prominent sculpture, to be of an indigenous maker. We have Father Marquette, and an Italian maker, and we really wanted this next one to be Indigenous, we found Jason Quigno. He's a stone carver out of Grand Rapids. He spent his early years up at KBIC, and we invited him to have his work here. He's being invited by the State Department. He's won at Art Prize. This guy's a really big deal. And this will be his first sculpture in UP. This will be a destination for people to see his work. He has proposed 7 stones. That's an example of one of his stones. They were quarried at Smith Quarry here, so they're all local. And there will be 7 of them representing each of the 7 grandfathers. The fire, kind of the eagles, heads on top, that's an example of what will be in the middle and a phase 2 at a later date. So it is the grandfathers around the fire. And someone was saying, why that area? Well, the tribe said, if you're going to put significant public art, make it in the most well-lit place, the most high-traffic place, and the most visible place. And Jason was excited because you're looking up at the Father Marquette statue, which is a story. You're looking at the downtown, the Ordock, and then you've got the 7 grandfathers. Now, that's a great conversation to have among people. Well, how do all these stories intersect? And I just think it's going to be a really beautiful addition to that pier. And the lessons by the grandfathers are, they're universal lessons. Loyalty, truth, love, all of these lessons that we can all share. Next slide. We're an evolving port city. That's a big message of the trail, right? Coal yards, we've changed over time and we're going to continue to change. And that's why we really feel it's important to make this a trail that can continue to live and grow. I've talked with Holly Greer's daughter several times. Holly Greer, first female commissioner, first mayor, founder of the Women's Center, co-founder of the Women's Center, and she joined the city commission because she wanted a safe way for her kids to take their bicycle to the pool, the Shutter's Pool. So she was the one that started that first bike path spur from, I believe it was, Dave, was it like Wright Street to Moosewood or to the Shutter's area, that area?
Started at Figure.
Thanks.
And it was constructed by the National Red.
Really? Another part of that story. And that's a really wonderful woman's story, but I know a lot of people, kids see that Holly Greer sign, a lot of them don't know who she was or what she did. And her family and her friends are very excited about this trail bringing more attention to Holly Greer. Next slide. Also with the master plan, you're asking us to be steward and cherish our natural assets. This trail, I really want to be an invitation for people to learn about the environment. We didn't have winter this year. Things are changing. And if we're going to have, residents that want to be good stewards, if we're going to invite people to live here, we want them to take care of this place that we call home and that's so dear to us. We need to show them what was here before and how to move forward doing that. This particular project, this lakeshore restoration project, we felt, the group of stakeholders and committee members from the History Center to Bonner Heritage, we felt this is where we talk about the power of the lake. The power of lake that includes an entire road and 8 of our shoreline. This is where we talk about the mythology of the lake, stories, some of the shipwrecks. But it's a great example because you can actually see how it changed. And I think it could be a really, really wonderful way for people, teachers to have place-based education curriculum throughout the trail with this space particularly. And also how we're using kind of ingenious engineering, first I think maybe in the Midwest to kind of solve lakeshore problems. That would be, just the engineering itself would be really interesting for many people. Next one, please. So just some pictures. And pictures like this and movie and footage will be used for sure in the interpretation along the trail. More pictures. It's interesting how things just happen. I love Mike Angeli's picnic spot. I rode by one day, it wasn't there. Mike Angeli retired, rode by and it was there. And I adored him. We had a lot of great laughs. He's a big supporter actually of arts and culture. And I think this would be great. It happens to have an accessibility, it's like, let's do something more there. And I think it would bring more attention to Mike Angeli and his service for the community. But again, how can we work together so these places just don't happen, but we actually can do them more intentionally. Next slide. Connecting our neighborhoods is also a big part of your master plan. And I think art and culture does that really well. It's what we are, right? We're not a bunch of just businesses. We're people that do things, we celebrate, we go to places, we eat together, we make things together, we experience things together, and that's all that connection and that culture. And so connecting our neighborhoods through this trail, connecting our neighborhoods through placemaking is huge. There's lots of things happening already on South Marquette that are happening by chance. How do we intentionally, I know from an arts and culture perspective, grow some of those opportunities and encourage them so our neighborhoods can benefit? Next slide. Accessibility and wayfinding is key. When we did the benches, the permanent dolomite benches were a functional public art project during the accessibility project. You can see they're designed so someone from a wheelchair can totally set themselves over onto the bench. Also, we do have signs in front of the public art. There's also Braille, signs in Braille. So really looking at the different ways that we can make spaces more accessible, but also that means making them more inviting, more welcoming, more warm. Next slide. Encouraging vibrancy. We talked about this particular project with the Indigenous Public Art here. It's a beautiful project. And I love the water forest there, there were trees that were in the earth and now those pilings for our ships. Next slide. And now a new cultural trailhead. This was always a welcome center, right? It was a chamber. That's why Needham Island had the first Art of the Rocks there. LSCP, I interviewed them before we wrote the grant. And they said, we, about 10 people a day, knocking on our door, use the restroom if they could find some brochures. It just, you couldn't get away from it. It's the front porch of the city. But right now, it's a pass-through. Our goal is to transform that space into a trailhead and a community space. We won't be programming there. A beautiful community space where people can learn about the city, the initiatives that you're working on, maybe a book club, maybe a baby shower, but a place for the community to see, and it's going to be beautiful, where the architecture is indoor, outdoor, where there's viewing platforms, and people can really be proud. And it'll be a stop on the way into Marquette, where you can learn about, this is where I go if I want to start a new business in Marquette. This is how I get to the police station. This is how I register to vote. A place that welcomes residents. Our offices will be there, so also a place that encourages arts and culture. And I really should mention, a lot of people participated in these grants, but Superior Watershed Partnership also assisted with that grant. You cannot write, $1.2 million of grants without assistance. And that's really important. Collaboration. Our office is getting pretty good at doing it now, but we have partners, and that's the beauty of having lots and lots of partnerships between projects. Next one. So this is also where our paths cross. Your expertise with planning and development is not mine. So, we want to bring people here. We want to make this a kind of an epicenter, front porch of the city. How do we do it safely? How do people cross the street? How do cars slow down? Which intersections are not handicap accessible? There's so many questions to this area. Where can we park? And that's something that we would like to approach during Art Week this year. If it's having functions and watching how people use the space, your input and your involvement in Art Week and participating to see how the community uses spaces like this, I think would just be an incredibly helpful tool for all of you to see how people use spaces. Next one. So engagement. I have to say, so let's see, Dave's there. David Census is up there. He was talking about the development and the history of development in Marquette. And sometimes these conversations aren't easy, but I'll tell you, around a table like that, it's a little bit easier than in new spaces like this. So to kind of have a friendly environment, people, their guards are down. I really encourage our community and our city officials to have conversations with people in spaces that inspire them and aren't as intimidating, maybe to connect with you. The stage down there, and I don't know, Sarah, if you performed at this space? She did. That's her. The acoustics were amazing. We're going to do another concert. The acoustics were amazing. And if you're sitting, you can't quite see it, but you see the Customs House. You can't see Marquette one place because shrubs are in front of it. You see the whole length of the boardwalk. We know there's going to be more development down there. That's a viewscape. Check it out when you're walking. It's really, really beautiful. You can close your eyes and imagine being old Marquette. And the acoustics there are wonderful. So just another opportunity. Next slide. So the role of arts and culture in planning. I went to the American Planning Association, and I got these two quotes that I thought were really appropriate. Civic leaders and urban planners have moved from the role of passive observers to active facilitators. Over the past decade, we've experienced a real focus on arts and culture in planning and economic development strategizing. Arts and culture need to be included in general plans because it's important to take a holistic approach where the decision makers from different fields, including cultural affairs, work together. So I like this opportunity. I love the idea of collaborating. We'd love to collaborate more with Dave and Andrea and his team and other departments too. You know, how can we approach things a little bit more holistically and work to activate spaces and work on greater civic engagement? And maybe even let the community know what you're doing through arts and culture. Next slide. Get rid of the last slide. So that's my presentation. Thank you. It was an honor to speak to you, and I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you so much, Tina, for presenting. I think a lot of us have heard of the cultural trail, but hearing some of the details and the story behind the storytelling trail was really, really great. So thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I really like what you said about connecting neighborhoods. Is there, after this project is done, is there any plan to maybe bring the trail into the heart of the city and come off of the shore to kind of draw people into the neighborhoods?
Dave and I have talked about that. We've talked about that with the History Center, obviously, with Northern. I just found out about a project Northern's doing called Wildcat Way. I didn't know about that, and that's, how do we better communicate so we can connect some of these projects? And then I found out that the person that's designing Wildcat Way actually was a student of urban ecosystems, one of the landscape designers. So just neat connections like that. But there's so many possibilities, I think, especially with wayfinding within the city and the different, like past, we've talked about community development about. My position, I do a lot of facilitating behind the scenes and coordinating. And then sometimes these turn into big projects. It's not like I'm in the back going, it's like they just happen to roll that way. But I think that the more we can communicate and talk about what's happening with each other in different parts of Marquette, some things will be a surprise. For example, there's an exploratory group looking at Fisher Street School right now. We're leaving the Arts and Culture Center. We need a space for these people to go, to make art. The library wasn't the best spot. You can't have oil painting there, you can't have a kiln, you can't have major woodworking. And it was a need of the Arts and Culture Master Plan 10 years ago. It was a need at State of the Arts, so we did a survey of the arts and culture community, and we found out during Art Week. So Fisher Street School is open, has its oldest standing school in Marquette, 1865. Gaines children from Gaines Rock all went to school there. And there are people now kind of thinking about how could that be a place for community to continue to learn and come together. But regardless if it's that space, we need a space like that in the community. And so I'm always like, here's an opportunity for people that want to come and gather to encourage it. That's walkability. That's an entrance to South Marquette. That makes more public art happen. So those types of opportunities, I'm always thinking about. Murals are the same thing. We can do a public art tour up 3rd Street just a little bit. We don't go all the way because it kind of stops. But now there's 2 more murals going up on 3rd Street. And we definitely work with businesses when they ask, hey, who do you know that can do a mural? trying to make sure we have quality units going in private development. But those types of things just keep widening that kind of vibrancy and that walkability.
Any questions, comments?
I would just say that a big part of their project needs to be how to maintain it once it's built. The city has a very long history of not maintaining what gets built with grant funds. Their funds are needed to start with, they'll need to be, and they don't come up with the funds to maintain it. I was responsible for some of that maintenance for a long time, including the father Marquette statue, when that was redone by the beautification committee. The company that came and did it, wax coating they put on was supposed to have been recoated, I believe, 3 years ago. So it was a fairly frequent renewal, and when I tried to get funding in my budget to do that, it wouldn't get approved. And we couldn't do it with the in-house expertise that we have. I'm sure the expertise doesn't really exist in-house, probably to maintain the murals. Because it's,
So I have a plan. I have an answer.
I would say make sure it is written into the project itself. When Rotary built the kids' school playground down top, they created an endowment for maintenance. And we were able to tap that a couple times to do the engineering design. I'm not sure what happened with it, how it was determined that some of the work that was used was not needing code anymore. But anyway, I would certainly see that as a big factor that to approve something like this, we really need to change the way the city has operated. We've had trails in the past, whether it be the major trails of the island, of Ottawa, wayfinding signs throughout the town were created in conjunction with Northern. They don't exist anymore because the maintenance isn't there. I hate to see all this effort put into a project like this, which I fully support, without dedicated planning.
So just really just quickly, I won't go into too much detail, but the idea behind the new space, the trailhead, is our office does a lot of grant writing. Then we can't depend on that, also because that changes over time, but is to have a business plan. LSCP is helping me with a business plan for that space because it has to be rentable. Right now, we pay over $30,000 every a year, for the library. Part of the motivation to leave too was to invest in city-owned property and not for rent. And we want to help them now write grants so they can also, and we're actually looking at some Michigan Council Arts and Culture Council grants for programming in that space. But yeah, how do we rent the space so we can take care of the space? And we have a public art fund. $30,000 is given annually to this fund. And I know that that's also contested. Some groups would be giving money to public art, but that $30,000 that the public art fund gave, leveraged that funding, that $57,000 funding from Michigan Native Heritage Fund, and that $30,000, you need that to match grants, right? And so a portion of that goes to maintenance. We've also needed to let it accrue. I'm happy to say that Father Marquette is getting a $20,000 makeover come last week of June, and he'll get it every 8 years. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it has to happen. And up to 6 people in the city are getting trained on how to make sure that how it's waxed every year. And then our office is responsible for that schedule. And yes, I am getting trained in how to take care of murals, not on private property, but on city property. So the Hurley Park mural, we're going to hire local artists with high school students. It is real kind of painting #1. And that will have a shelf life. But also the public art policy, when do things have to be deaccessioned? Maybe you just watch them crumble or you do deaccession them. So there'll definitely be a plan for every artwork that we do and funding for that, because then we're in a very successful public art program. But I'm looking at best practices, and staff is being trained, professional development, so I'm really, really confident We also have a Friends of Marquette Public Art that you're gonna start hearing about more. And there's actually people that are already talking about how can I give large amounts to public art, especially people that, for example, care about the statue. You know, so that's a mechanism to fund the Friends of. And I think I covered it, yeah. Oh, and then also we're putting together a 101 for local murals. You're gonna put a mural in your building in Marquette. This is how you prepare the surface. This is the kind of paint you might consider using, and this is how you take care of it.
Very glad to hear that. And if I could, I'd also like to give some credit to some of the art. You showed the other painting, the old painting from the island, West Isle Park.
Yeah.
That was painted by William Allen Jr. He was cemetery sexton at the time. We found the original, what I believe was the original painting of that, for that sign, rotting away in the basement of the garage at the island, which had been flooded several times. And it was no longer usable, but you could get an idea of what the picture was. He tried to basically paint the same picture, but painted it with his interpretation of it.
I'd like to display that maybe even in Prescott Pavilion, because even though the Public Art Commission doesn't want to take care of it, it would be
He didn't use the proper basic
Yeah.
material.
Yeah.
But he also drew and painted the art that is in the center circle of the arch going onto the island. And he mentioned indigenous people. He didn't do the cutout of them. It was done by a public works fabricator, John Stedman, who was indigenous. And,
So I need to talk to you because that's a part of the inventory and no one knows who did that beautiful piece.
that empty circle frame was up there for well over a decade with nothing in it. And we got permission to have city staff to put in there.
This, I'm hoping this and this guy, I hope, are allowed to go into the new space. This is a landmark. It's also going to be restored. We wanted to make sure that we restored our work. The whole color will change when it's restored. The Ross Art Museum has quite a big collection, and he's a Swedish plein air painter who is famous for doing seascapes. And his parents, he immigrated to America from Sweden to Chicago when he was 31. His parents had friends up here, so he had a connection. And he would sell a painting to stay on someone's couch, kind of thing, you know. But he has a painting, and I wrote it down before I came here that I could tell you. It's a neat connection. So there is, in Gothenburg Gallery, there's a painting of Lake Superior called Morning by him, and it's called Lake Superior Morning in Sweden, which is cool. And he was interviewed several times in the 20s and 30s by reporters, and he says that never in my entire career have I seen any one particular district that offers so many possibilities here. There's no more beautiful place in the world than Marquette. So I love that as a visitor, a frequent visitor came here, painted that, and it's sitting here in this room. I think it's pretty fantastic too. Oh, the person that's going to, last one I promised, the person that's going to work on the painting in Minneapolis, the conservator, I asked her, I goes, what's the coolest thing you're working on right now? And she's working on the goat from Sound of Music. So her job is to restore all the marionettes.
Fun. Any other comments, questions? Well, I want to work on a grant because I've been working with my students doing oral histories of people who live that or work with the Coast staff on it, and learning more about the rich kind of industrial history of that early to mid 20th century. I mean, I know industrial history is a big theme, I'm sure.
Yeah.
With everything on our lakeshore, but we digitize that with offerings. We look at archives and probably a grant in there where we could have a QR code linked to the stories, the digitized stories that people who work in that. Some way to share that part of that.
So many opportunities.
Yeah,
You work with
so-
Palmyra Northern History Center, so it's all shared. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really exciting though, but thank you very much for your work and for coming to share with us.
Yeah, reach out, here to help you, we're the city office.
Yeah.
Before we move, the backside of the timeline part of this, I thought it'd be valuable for the planning commission to understand the phasing of the project. Because this summer is really just the start of the on-ground work.
Right, so they hope to come to you to kind of show you conceptual designs, what will these story markers look like, what are the stories they've narrowed down to tell, the other stories, how can, some of the different methods, and that would be a phase two, how we're gonna collect these stories. But these kind of pause points, so for example, if there's a pathway they want to try to create to go to Cup River, or a landscape design portion of Matson Park in some area, that's going to be something that we will have to decide, oh yes, we do want this. We'll have to raise funds with that funding to make those happen. So the story markers, that's what we'll call our working title, those markers, whatever they look like, I don't know yet, that will be installed fall 2024. I did make sure we had an extension on the grant, just in case that goes over to 2025. And then we'll have to look down the road and make a plan for the other, parts, work with our partners to get other parts of the trail, different phases of the trail. But when it comes to the wrap and the spark, that project, the RFP should be going out this month, maybe the end of March, so April, and we should have an architect selected for that project shortly. So that would be also fall 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, okay, so I think next on our agenda is, are there any citizens wishing to address the commission on non-agenda items? Okay. We don't have any correspondence or reports, no trees, so we will go on to our work session on the land development code amendment.
Staff and planning commission will continue to work on amendments on the land development code. This effort will continue until all known issues that need to be addressed have been completed, and then a joint meeting with the city commission will be scheduled to discuss the completed work and a potential date for public hearings on the proposed changes. A document containing some of the items to be discussed tonight, I'll bring that up here, and then, depending what we find out here, and then there's more content as, they put in memo that we're still working on, but this is where we're at now. Okay. The first one is, we've had a couple of questions about, the figure 45 and 46 in the land development code. So engineering asked if we could just add this text, just to make it clear, and then add the graphics that I have circled and highlighted here. Do you guys have any comments on that?
On my one, on the zero feet parking. I saw nothing in the text on it, and it's a sizing and dimension at all for the maneuver space between the other federal space.
So-
It's not considered part of the 23 feet. If you look at the bottom, that,
Oh, the X's.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, I will ask engineering about that. Thank you very much. Any other thoughts?
Super minor, but just a slightly higher resolution on the diagram, just a little fuzzier, is that possible, or is it? You get the idea.
I understand what you're saying. So I'd have to recreate the original. I'm working with adding to it and whatnot. Maybe the document would be better. I mean, I guess it's still in probably.
It's not, I mean, people will clearly know what it's, just the general professionalism of that
Recreate it.
Yes, I have a question. Are these the only options for federal spaces that we have? One I saw when I was, in Kansas City last summer was the vacuum angle parking. I was wondering if that's an option that we might be able to include in the parking.
Well, actually, there is a project that you're going to be getting site plan for fairly soon that is going to have a vacuum and parking proposal. Yeah. So it's not off the table, it's just not a start. This is just one of them. And this can cover just about everything. Back in annual parking isn't for everything, or I don't think in the city.
No, I don't know. But I do know that depending on what the angle is, then that's telling you to move your hand. That's what this is about. It's not telling you whether it's back in or, it's not saying you keep it.
Do you have any questions or comments about the there? Okay, that's pretty straightforward, I think. What about adding language to Article 4 that comes to the resolution?
So, we did research with the fire department and, the county building codes to see about our language that was a carryover from the old zoning ordinance with the building separation. And, realized that we don't need that, it's not to meet any of the stuff, so, we basically now propose to state the proposed separation distance between buildings must be determined to comply with the Michigan Building Code and meet all requirements for fire safety and maintenance of structures. These requirements must be established before submitting a preliminary and final site plan to the city approval.
And this is really kind of driven by, the fact that separating buildings unnecessarily increases the cost of development. And it also can have some unforeseen, negative consequences, like what you can see with the current status of the Rolling Meadows project on M553 South, where, they had a site that was fairly challenging for development to start with because the topography was very rolling and there was wetland areas. And the building separation requirements that we had in place required them to be really selective about where all the buildings were going to be located. And it also, if they didn't have that requirement, I can't say exactly how it would be different. But the fact is, they had a lot of grading and tree removal that they did that was probably unnecessary. And it's really an unfortunate situation now. What's there is basically a huge clear cut. And, you don't know how well the soils are secured in there, we're going to be checking on that. But if the project doesn't get restarted again this spring or summer, which is a possibility, it's going to require that they go back in and plant grass and just do whatever they can to prevent, siltification of streams and wetland areas. But it's just a really stark visual of what we're really requiring of people is to use up a lot of land unnecessarily for building separation.
We don't have enough land as it is.
So the next section here on definitions, and when we began this year's project, we didn't have that many definitions that we were planning to update. So the document that was in the code here, only had, some outlines of some of these. I've gone, I'll send you an update on this. This is a work in progress. There's still a lot of work on this code that we're still planning to do that we haven't gotten through yet. Let's start with this. I don't plan to go through these all in detail here, but I just want to let you know that all the ones that were in the draft document here that weren't finished, gone in and finished those and added some more. But the agriculture situation, so in our code, we have agriculture as a defined land use, and we have agriculture like as a defined land use. And those terms come from the right to farm act, and use the right to farm act. And agriculture as a land use is a very sticky subject because it is regulated by the right to farm act, and then there are generally accepted agricultural management practices that apply to anything called agriculture that meets this definition of agriculture, and it has to meet all three of those standards, by the way, to be considered agriculture. But we don't allow agriculture anywhere in the city of Marquette. It meets that decision, that definition. Because in the right farm act, it says if you allow agriculture in any zoning district, you have to allow it everywhere. The law is very, it's not friendly to a small town like Marquette. Bigger cities have, there's some carve-outs in the law that allow cities over 100,000 to make some adjustments to what this says. But anyway, so we didn't have a definition in that agriculture, although we had land use in there. So we needed that. We have agriculture right is if it doesn't meet the farm operation in that, but it meets the other two, producing farm product and commercial activity, that is what is agriculture right. So you might have a little garden where you're growing something that is you can consider a farm product, and you might sell it at a farmer's market, and that's okay. It's agriculture. So there are places where agriculture is like things, and then there's other things, so that law for families that have residents that have limited food production, and as well as the limited animal feeding. But we need to clarify this because another thing on the end of this that I added to this definition for you to think about is that if it is something that is agricultural, but it's within a totally enclosed building, that's something that the act, the Right Farm Act, does not necessarily say the city can approve of as something that's basically like an exception. It's not an exception, but you can say if you decide that that is like manufacturing and not agriculture, I don't think we're going to have any problems with it. So that's what I like to do because there are people that want to do things within enclosed buildings. And that's becoming something that's fairly profitable for people growing mushrooms, people growing some kind of microgreens, things like that. And I know there's people that want to do it in cities like that. And so this is what I'm proposing to consider this definition so that we can allow some types of agriculture as long as they're totally within the enclosed building. Then we get into the Article 4 regulations on where we allow those. That's another part of this. But it's not explaining why this is in here as it's written, and we can talk about it as we please. You believe that this will stand up to scrutiny against the Farm Act, but it meets the conditions and the cover up. Yeah, so, Michigan State University Extension they've been publishing, education for communities on agriculture issues for several years now. The last update they did to the document in 2021. It's about a 40-page document. It's about zoning for agriculture. And then we have an extension educator up there, who lives in Marquette, who's done a lot of, he primarily does zoning and other land use education around the state of place. He's based in UT. And he agreed, and there is a little box in that table that basically says this very thing. Like, the community considers enclosed agricultural operations as different as light manufacturing. It's basically from the media. I'm willing to, and we'll talk with the city attorney about this, but I don't really see any reason why we would have any issues with that. As long as it's defined this way, and we have a clear framework for what's allowed, and standards.
Would you be able to allow a nursery to like benefits from using the seedlings where they have trees they may not start trees from scratch, but they do maintain some of the shrubs and trees outside.
As long as it's not farmed, as long as it doesn't meet the definition of producing a farm product, it is agriculture life, yes, and I consider that issue of greenhouses and those kind of nurseries. It's not
we
clear
did have
what
a Christmas tree gathering in the city for a while. It's been a long time since they predated whatever provisions and cold development.
Right. Nursery stock for flowers and shrubs and trees that aren't, that's not necessarily a farm operation.
Okay, just want to be careful when you
Yeah.
go keep an operation like that. Don't look too fast.
Right.
Is it considered more like a retail operation, because they're selling them?
Yeah.
They purchase them and resell them?
Right, that's the way I'm thinking about it, but if they do sell anything that's, they would be prohibited from selling stuff that would farm stuff.
Well,
So the act defines all those
from
things.
seeds, some of them.
This is where it gets really sticky, because the act specifies the farm products are, it has a long list. And if they're on that list, then we're talking about farming.
Unless it's slowly closed and they can take a part of it.
And if you allow one thing, you gotta allow everything, that's the challenge. So you can't say no to somebody else that wants to grow crops.
So marijuana growing operation is not agriculture because it's superseded by marijuana. Yeah.
Now, you think, I've heard farming, 10 people from farming, but I don't know the farming act is going on. They're saying that act says that if you allow like livestock, it's the same type of farming product as like producing honey from bees, like cultivation, or maybe even prepare for that kind of thing. Because, I mean, to me, I'm like, let people grow whatever they want, wherever. I mean, this seems, I mean, I understand why we need to do this, but it just seems like,
I do.
wait over here, I'm like, I can see how people are really get frustrated with policies, because it
Yeah.
seems like it's making it more difficult for people to grow food, which is in an era of like increasing food insecurity.
Yeah, so the problem's at the state level. It's, we're just protecting ourselves. You may not be familiar with what's happening down in Forsyth Township, but they suffer not having protecting themselves against this by having to accept a person's going from handful of chickens to 1,200 children.
On a very good,
And
on a lake.
the lake became very polluted because they didn't have the protections in place. And that's the kind of thing we have to, protect ourselves. Not everybody that wants to be a farmer knows how to be a farmer. Or, knows how to do it well.
So
Anyway.
are we have like another section agriculture, like, everybody is suggesting is.
We already do.
We do.
Oh, okay.
That's,
Yeah.
Curiosity, though, if the doctor tells me I need a care animal, I got 2 goats. Well, farm now, right? Care animal.
As a pet goat, is that right?
No, I'm just saying, I mean, hell, you run into that every day.
So you can have a garden if you don't sell the product, then you're not in a farm? I mean,
We can talk about hypotheticals. But
No, but I mean,
Like
it-
farming stuff.
no, but I mean, seriously, people have gardens all over town. As long as they're not selling the product, then it's not a,
No, you can sell something. It's agriculture, like,
okay.
I don't think you can sell it at your lot, but you can take
you
it.
can't sell it at your home.
Right, right.
You can't have a farm stand.
I don't want to understand what
Right,
I'm saying.
right. Okay, so we're going to go through, these definitions, and like I said, I'll send you the updated list. And explain, why some of these things are in there, but, nothing, just some things here that I felt like we needed to, address that aren't in there. Not all of them are all that important to talk about, it just means that aren't necessarily, everything defined, so I think we deal with a lot. Yeah, I didn't highlight it because I didn't want necessarily on the guys' name,
Oh, and
doesn't make it easy.
no,
No, some of the, I left those in there without defining the definitions for them since, so these have been finished since then. Recommendations like the consultant recommended we find use like manufacturing is another one where we've had some, so if we get on the light manufacturing, this is in the code, but we've had a hard time over the years with, since we didn't even have a definition for this when I first started, so we had to create a definition to differentiate between heavy manufacturing and light manufacturing. Most of the companies in the city that are brewing their own beer or wine, they're light manufacturing, as an example. So when Port Dock opened, that was the first brewery that opened in the city for, 20, 30 years, and the beer and started brewing beer after, I did it for a long time. Beer was brewing in the 90s, but since then, Port Dock is the first number one brand, so brewing. One of the black apples. Okay. Now I'm pretty sure where that was because we took their application. I remember we took their application for it. Andy and Dave were brewing in the garage for them, put some more support in there to differentiate like light manufacturing, what it is, because we're always, from time to time, we're being challenged on how we determine that. And there's just no easy way to do it. We've looked at lots of different cities do it. There's no easy, clear cut way. So at some point, we may have to make a hard decision. And we've had to do that a couple times with people that, argue that this flavor isn't like anyway. So this other category, arson manufacturing, is something I came across, and I thought that's helpful. That's helpful if we can differentiate another standard of between what is light and what's not even rises to that. And light manufacturing is a special land in this one district. There's some types of manufacturing you don't need to have a special land use permit for. And those are the things kind of addressed by this artisan manufacturing. So basically, one of the things that occurred to me as I was looking at this artisan manufacturing that's helpful with light manufacturing is to differentiate between, is this something somebody's usually doing on their own or something that requires multiple workers to produce this product? In most cases, I think in every case where we approve of light manufacturing special land use permit, it does require multiple workers to produce. It's not just something somebody's doing to supplement or anything. It's their business, or it's going to be a business. So the artisan manufacturing thing is sometimes proposing to put in there so that we can allow people to continue doing some things out of their homes that not necessarily a home-based business or any kind of brick and mortar business, probably. There's always some exceptions, so that's just another thing we want to bring to your attention, getting feedback on that. And these things, of course, we're going to be working on this for another month and a half, at least, days. Or we're spending down anything, but in months, so we have plenty of time to get feedback.
I mean, one thing that kind of read all that taxes and using that for me, would be acceptable.
Just one point, I recall several times in the past discussions we had for the they actually, it's always seemed that the mine bureau is like a big factory business, and it was an issue, I think, before we changed some of the downtown zoning to allow for it, that they were operating downtown for decades in the area that didn't allow it. There's new language jobs, where which may be totally obsolete in a few years, but at least for the present.
If you have to print shop over something, I think from the definition, that's something that,
If we keep the definition, at least,
yeah,
this is the point, for the print shops to where
right. The other big one that I wanted to address for you, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot of them that was in the packet for working on a couple of these issues that Andrew Kilpatrick discussed, the solar energy systems. So that's the next big thing we're going to get into here once we get into definitions. But we needed a definition for solar energy system because we talked about this before, about that section aim to allow for some exceptions where the solar system could be in front yard. That got me into looking at another, land use guide on zoning for solar energy systems and creating a new section for Article 6 and changing or adding a whole lot to Article 7 so that we can have a set of standards for both special land use solar energy systems that are greater than 20 kilowatts, under 2 megawatts, and then those that are just under that 20 kilowatts, which would be more residential or really small systems that we even have business to run a piece of equipment or lighting or something. So there's the definition, and then we'll go into these sections. And just, again, this is just something you're gonna need to look at, and get back to us on what you think of this, but I think this is a pretty fully formed draft. I worked on this for quite a long time. So the Article 6 portion is for these principal use or accessory use systems that are either going to be roof mounted or if it be building integrated, they're probably going to be either roof mounted or ground mounted. The building integrated part is defined in here, and that just more or less be some. You won't see a lot of those, but some people do have these systems that are basically a lot. It could just be a window collection area where you're collecting from the substation, side of the building, collecting energy for a hot water system. But so there's standards here for roof mounted. Mostly they're just for roof mounted in this section, and then you get into the accessory ground mounted systems with standards for height and applications, usability. So, and then there are provisions in here so that if a non-conforming, if it's different, use on non-conforming building, the solar system itself won't be considered non-conforming. So you could add these to non-conforming structure without getting into anything related to that non-conforming structure. And then there's some front yard provisions here for demonstrate, needing to demonstrate some standards for that to be determined as an acceptable exception to the requirement for front of the rear yard, side yard placement for those kind of systems. If they're done. And then there's the principal use system, so that's meaning this system that's the primary use of the property, is to generate power. And that's probably not going to be something we encounter with these smaller systems, but it's possible. It's possible once in a while, things might want to do that. But less than 2 megawatts, you're not generating a lot of power, so I don't know that, unless it's for use by the business, I'm not sure that it makes sense to generate power to the grid on a system that small. We consider it to 20 kilowatts to be sort of, the way it's defined in here, the way it's defined in the code now, it says that's the utility scale, which is kind of a misnomer. It means it's really larger than residential. But the Prescott power plant is 540 or something megawatts. So 20 kilowatts is a tiny fraction of what that is. It's not close to likely what we consider power plant utilities. So even 2 megawatts is, again, a pretty small system, as systems go that are producing power for the sole purpose. So this is a pretty small scale system here that we're describing as principal use or accessory use in this section. But still, we need to call those out and then in Article 4, and then define where they're allowed, where you would say that they're allowed by special land use permit or permitted outright as a permitted use. Um, So typical of, with any other use, we've got all the standards we want to see for something that's going to have machinery, equipment on the ground that's not, part of the natural landscape. So some screening provisions, landscaping. And these pretty much come right out of, another NSU extension publication for zoning for solar systems. They do a great job of providing a lot of these recommendations. And we want to have in this section a provision for decommissioning the system at the end of this life cycle, so that there's a plan, so it's not just built and then either they quit using it or it's used when they receive the life to do they don't be happy wanting to work. So that's the framework for that, and then the section 7 part of this is the smaller systems where we're talking about in here probably more or less residential roof mounted systems or residential ground mounted systems. But so we already have this described in here. It's just solar energy. Want to be more descriptive about what is included in this section. So these are, it does say principal or accessory use. And it's kind of hard to imagine what a principal use in this part of the code might be. But with everything else, it's possible. It's possible for it to be a principal use on a residential lot for a ground mounted solar system or a commercial lot. This isn't limited to commercial. This is accessory or principal on smaller systems. So, and then again, we did figure out an extension here for where these would need to be, some of these systems would need to be approved through a plot plan for the residential, which means just, if you've ever seen our applications, if you're going to build if it's just a deck or an addition to the house, you don't require you to get architectural or engineering plans to us. You can do it on the plot. You can draw it out on graph paper, draw it out on an aerial photo. But the commercial projects would require a site plan, like anything else to add into commercial lots. If it's in addition to the property, the building, it's got to be site plan. So there's some exceptions built in here at the end. So it's just for one piece of equipment like lights or a weather station or a vehicle charger, well pump. That one requires that we administer the same section. We want to make this flexible so it's not too rigid, too difficult for people to require them to have cost on it. So I think that's about it. There were some changes to the existing language. Some of this is existing language here with section E. We're adding just a few little tweaks to that. And
Just on the exemptions, could you make it clear that landscape lighting, that, we go by it, look at, so whatever is exempt from permits as well as site plan? just like, difficult thing to put your head in and along with if you want. I don't think that permit to, put that kind of stuff in.
Oh, you mean the little,
Yeah.
the little solar, like.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I have a question. Why are the requirements based off the amount of power figured out? The power is always changing, so I could constantly change as well, so I'm curious if it's.
It's really based more or less on what the level is that the DLP requires permits for interconnection. So we consulted with Michael Larson from Michigan Energy, options, about this section of it, and then, he recommended talking to DLP, which is the recommendation. And that's where we started when we put the first parts of this code together. We did use their standard 20 kilowatts is where they, there's a different requirement if you're 20 kilowatts or above. As far as they're concerned with interconnection to the grid, you have to get permits from them in some specific standards. And then below 20 kilowatts, basically not regulated by them, like the same one. It's very easy to do below 20 kilowatts.
If it's the case of this, meaning that the DLP should have the reference in here, okay?
I don't know. I think what you're saying is, should we just say whatever, I don't know how to phrase that, and I don't know that there's a good way to phrase it. I think I understand what you're saying, right? So it's like, yeah, so it's like the thing where we had, in the beginning, we were talking about the separation of buildings, using building for example. So, I think if we just keep our finger on the pulse of the DLP, we should be okay. If there's a way I can figure out how to do that, I will. And maybe what I can do is, have, another discussion with the person at the DLP and talk about the interconnection standards and see if there's.
Question, I have a single question, actually, I tried to just quickly look up other community solar
Mhm.
farms, and I did notice that they often go by those categories of 20 kilowatts, like, I think they're mostly standardized.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know, I have to say something like, why is it just like, on the physical structure and not about, amount of energy and stuff?
I've written that very much focus on the physical
Exactly,
direction.
and forever, because I just think about. I was really question about the definition of a solar energy system, like, especially talking about buildings being integrated as solar energy systems. So like, for example, we build a passive solar house, is that a solar energy system? And therefore, would we have been subject to getting a permit for having a solar energy system because we have orientation and the chemical of our house and how we design it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it seems like the most of our code is talking about photovoltaics, like electricity production, right?
Mhm.
So, you're like, I mean, if somebody has like a solar hot water, they're gonna have a little bit of dimensionality to it, like
Yeah.
solar panels.
So this is the answer to that question. Number 3, the building integrated RCS are subject only to land development, so the requirements applicable to the structure of the building, not to the section down on the RCS permits, provided there are no roof or ground mount solar panels or arrays as part of the building integrated solar system. So that just means if you put in a roof, mounting panels, you're getting solar permit, but we're not going to permit the building itself as a solar energy. That just has to be the code, in place for the structure.
I guess, I don't know, I've only seen a couple of like solar hot water systems, like, one like, they have like the big collectors and
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like that fundamentally different. I don't know, like, I'm just wondering, like, the solar energy systems definition. I don't know, it seems like, are we just talking about electricity?
The solar system consists of a lot of different components that aren't typically I want to show you a picture here that Michael gave us. And he had just taken it the week before. This is in Washington. This is, that array is used, I think he said it's enough use, there's enough energy generated by that one array for the home, all the passive needs of that home. And that was allowed there, it's right next to the street. And that was allowed to be there like that, under the code. That's not, we're not proposing to allow that. That's on the lot to be, lot is there.
I was gonna say that's one of the reservations on that.
Just had a tangential related question. In the definition of the solar energy system, you mentioned batteries. And I'm wondering if there is any separate permitted use for whole home battery backups, like power walls, and how they interconnect into the grid and how the additional necessary that. Are we only using whole home batteries as part of an SES permit, like permit, the permit? You know, you have a home battery? Not that I'm aware of. Okay. Not aware of anybody that has one.
Well, I mean, what, structural things might you need to do to the home?
But I mean, it's an outdoor battery, you can interact and testing from, you know, if you have a collector or go into your battery system and then at night you drop in the battery. But it's probably goes down and you still have it on, you don't have that backbone to be able to electrify those wires. I've heard them being built inside people's homes. It's just be structure.
Can you explain, like, in section, I think this standard came up a couple times about capacity and in terms of the screening and stuff, and there's some of the, board, like, 647A3, or no, C4, screening of opacity is 80% of SES, up to 60% of maximum, so. Can you explain, I mean, I think I get opacity, but if they're trying to make it less obvious that there's some kind of, thing to find like screening or something, but like, what is that, like, what would that look like in reality? Like, what would like 80%, is that like,
So, some of this isn't very, black and white.
right, like, I don't know what that means. I feel like
Well,
I'm-
yeah, 80%, I mean, that's kind of a visual thing, you know, we're talking about, in terms of capacity, it's a judgment call, what 80% is going to be. You try to be, trying to be screening 80% of that system. That would be the standard that this is trying to achieve, at least 80% screening.
Fencing or vegetation material?
Both are options.
We could put pine trees behind it,
And the section above that.
and you couldn't see it on the other side, you don't, the side that's facing toward the sun would be. I've seen this done out west, that happened out, this, all Colorado's been doing forever. And they would put trees behind it, so the neighbors didn't really have a visual of the panel. but the panel's facing away from the neighbor anyway.
Mhm.
So, and it just kind of blocks the view, it looks like vegetation rather than seeing the back of the panel.
Mhm. We have standards like this in, I think 75% for parking, commercial, between commercial, residential, green, buffer area.
Yeah, some areas is 100% screened, depending on.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just sending you a video in my brain about that.
This is the recommended standard, I mean, you could easily say 100%, or 70%.
Yeah, it's all that. It seems to be extremely confusing. I couldn't quite figure out the 3-foot berm that that's gonna do. We put berm here, we put berm there, why don't we just limit it to rough mounted systems only? And commercial could do the same thing. Doesn't count in height, you're saying?
Nothing,
Says it doesn't count on the height of your building.
oh, the roof mounted, yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta tip it up a little bit, or take the old Shopko building, maybe put a whole system up on top of that roof, and it wouldn't affect anything. I could see.
Right.
I mean, I read a lot of stuff all the time. And it's confusing to me. I get confused easily and stuff.
I have some very confusing through this, and I'm thinking like, just like food systems, right? We want it to be, in my mind, we want it to be as easy as possible for someone who wants to grow food in their yard, to grow food. We want to make it as easy as possible in terms of our solar panels, as long as it's not in the neighbor's view shed or whatever. You know what I mean? It seems like, is that achieving that goal? Is this achieving that goal? And we also kind of on that note, we had talked about potentially, like, obviously, I know the purpose of the only is to create consistent and clear rules for everybody so that if once people get used to it, we can do this, these are the rules. But these rules do seem kind of confusing. And, we had talked about the potential of waiving the fee for the permit. Have you, anybody, talked more about that?
That's not something,
Extension findings for solar, and it said local governments, not community, big service, but like local governments do have the ability to consider the waiving of the. And I think that was
yeah, there's no, but then you're setting up something that, you're setting up an inequality between different uses. So some uses shouldn't have fees, some should. That's, how do you justify that the city shouldn't collect revenue for our services in permitting things between different uses? That's a debate that the city commission should, if you think it's important, that's the debate for the city commission to have with the community. Which priorities do they think they should not collect revenues for?
I can speak for our solar ordinance in the area.
So Michael Larson and I have talked about that quite a bit. And his take on it is our permit fees are the fee is so low that it doesn't affect the cost of anybody's decision whether or not they're gonna have a solar system built.
How much is going to be
So it's
$160.
But wasn't that also a recommendation from our master plan consultants for, trying to increase housing density? That was the city commission, or the city commission should look at waiving fees for certain types of housing instead. So isn't just for this, it's same quality is there in that area too, but we're trying to incorporate that, stable and everything else.
Yeah. That's that's not our decision. These are only involved. But so it sounds like what you're saying now about the standards is that you guys need to have a debate on whether you want to have screening for ground mounted systems. It sounds like somebody don't want screening or any of these standards.
I mean, it has to be in the rear backyard anyway.
Well, that's not, the landscaping on the slide is in your yard.
Question for Andy, how is this gonna affect the green space requirement?
The structure, yeah,
Put it in the backyard as panels, and,
It doesn't, it doesn't,
oh, you can't put a shed there, but you can put up a solar panel.
it's an open structure, though. It's not a fixed thing, or the precipitation can't percolate and get to the ground below it.
Also, I believe you need to have a licensed electrician for this stuff, and you need a permit from the building codes department.
Yeah.
You can't just, you know, put together on Saturday and do it.
I'm pretty sure the PLP won't know how to do it without having the county building folks look at it.
Yeah, you know, a licensed electrician to do it. So the fee is getting up there.
One more question about, not so much the electricity project, but one of the early systems that was out there from 5 years ago, I don't know, was just panels you could hang on an exterior wall, with tubing to them for water. And all you had to do was drill 2 holes in the wall and connect it to your plug. With panel, separate panel with cables on the exterior wall, so you consider fitting into the building structure. So, I'm just wondering whether you would be differently, but me, you could interpret it as integrated with destruction.
Yeah, it sounds like something else.
The old code says something like, it's kind of like siding or things like that. And the same thing if the roof, if it's your shingles, part of that, and it's not being attached to the roof or being raised up, that also doesn't require permit because that's part of the structure.
Any part of the plan.
Yeah.
So back to the screening question, screening here does, it applies to frontage. So, along frontage streets. It's not just everywhere. So those standards were in one street and not the residential streets.
That's where the rear or side yard of
I mean, you can read through these, it's all pretty much defined where this stuff applies.
Okay, so in section B4, visibility, this is residential, and shall be within the side of the after the screening panels, freely practiced by right of way, freely practiced by the screening from surrounding the street. So if you're having, let's say, is that like only your lot is, street. Yeah, that's right. Or if you're 2 lots in, you still see the or something like the street somewhere, 2 lot building.
I think a lot of this needs a graphic, just like we did with many of the other, provisions. And it could take, quite a bit of effort to develop that graphic, but I think it really need to look into trying to, to address. Right.
Short of that, this is just like, when we deal with dumpsters. What we just came up with the dumpsters. It's not beautiful from the adjacent street. It doesn't have to be screened.
Only in commercial and industrial areas, right? And I don't think that's why most of it is here. Like, it's like that one that goes with the business.
You asked me 4 questions.
Sorry, and it's getting late, it's after 8 o'clock. She said that it's in the front yard, but I'm pretty sure it's still not in the front yard, only for certain.
I think we gotta do some homework there.
Yeah, because I read that too, that could be in the front yard of the residence.
I don't think so.
No, residential front yard is not.
Okay, that makes sense.
So let's say if it can't be in the backyard, it can be in the front yard.
So there's provisions for that in some settings and not others. It's, I don't know all this stuff, right? I gotta scroll through and look at it and read it to answer every one of these questions, so if we think that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing.
I think it needs to be really simplified and clarified. These ideas are really helpful too, to have a picture.
All of these standards though are the basic standards, and they're all very basic to anything you're gonna build. So as far as simplifying it further, I don't know how we make it simpler. Because we do have that height standards, and I think location standards. Investment in new conformity and applications in this part of the code. But basically the bulk dimension standards, that's what most of our dimensional standards are. Bulk dimensions, where's the location, we're lining it. What's the dimensional limits? And then screening,
That's what I think is a simplified experience, right? Because there's a lot of. But maybe we can clarify the graphic.
so there's, this is the, so we're in the section here on the accessory use stuff for smaller businesses. And it does say here under visibility, section B, that maybe placed in front of administrative approval or applicant can demonstrate these 3 things. Where it would be coming to these 3 categories.
If you look at the topography, one side of the hill, no problem, on the other side of the hill, you've got a problem. But the sun only comes up in one place, and circles around, and then sets. So, to make it efficient, you need that, goes around.
So I think we demonstrated that putting it in that area where it's required is not going to be financially feasible or unreasonable, it's totally unreasonable, then that is an administrative decision. A lot of these are- The front yard as a right is front. I don't think there's a lot of residents that are gonna want that. It's the same. That lot that you, there, I don't think that, you know, is what people are gonna want to see. It's the same.
It's a piece of money, so.
That's in the rear yard. No. Okay. It's not in front of it.
It's sort of problem.
All right, well, for the sake of our brain capacity and getting late, should we come back to this? I think that's a good conversation. It's not, I don't think this one is like, you know, ready to go off the citizen side, flies around. Shall we come back to this and move on to the next storage of recreational vehicles? Yeah. No more van life. Now, what do you guys think about this addition of the recreational vehicle class use as a dwelling unit in residential zoning districts?
It's already defined in the definitions that you can't use it as a dwelling unit. This is just bringing it into this section so that people, it's another place where people can see it and then get into the storage issue about
Is that
RVs.
sailboat on Cleveland, I think it is, years. And it's in the front yard and adjacent to the neighbor's house and has not moved. Ever.
It's not a motor vehicle, so
No, but I mean,
it's a piece of furniture.
I got a question on that. It's quite a few years ago now, but I had relatives come up. And they wanted to stay in their motorhome on the driveway for the night. And somebody come by and said, you can't do that in Marquette. You can't have them live in a motorhome. Or a trailer or anything else, which kind of crazy in my book. They're not gonna live in the residence forever. They're only gonna be there for a couple of days.
Right, and I'm bringing up the code to show you that we do now have a time limit in the code that allows for you to have that.
You can stay, and this is pretty much standard everywhere in the country, is you can stay in a, motorhome for 14 days in one spot.
That's not in our code, though, is it?
Yeah,
It is now, yeah.
it's been in there for a while.
well, and that's what I'm talking about with this public, because you could stay in this sailboat.
Yeah.
14 days, from home for a day.
Yeah, it's, any part, shall not exceed 14 consecutive days.
And if you want to stay in longer than that, you have places where it's legal to do that.
It is, it's just I'm showing you this part of the code. He's added it to A, and B tells you all that stuff. What Dave is saying in this document here, he's just adding something from the definition, but the B part is still there, we just don't have it in this Word document, it's still here. Here's A, 1, 2, and then 3 is going to be added, and you still have B, and then,
So that's the distance code, and And of course, we add this stuff because we encounter issues and we end up in court, and end up in court on this issue.
We all want students living in vehicles, and I know a lot of people who work in the town, and other areas.
And we get residents that call and say, why are my neighbors, having people living in the driveway? I don't want to see people living in my driveway also, and I know the driveway also. And it's a violation to the code. city commission wants to allow that, we can allow it.
Okay, any other thoughts, comments on that? All right, is there, moving on, I guess, adding language here and before that 1402, site plan review.
Yeah, we're just kind of making it easier for people when they look at this list that makes it a little bit more clean cut. Basically, we have existing language, we have to work on. On the screen here, we have additions, alterations, non-residential multifamily accessory structure. I want to make clear we're not talking about single family, but the same with that accessory structure, because we do have code. People actually do read the code and they ask you these questions, and I'm going, no, it's easier for it. So at this level, it says where it's exempt, so then we wanted to make it clear that it, instead of saying it's to be understood, we have to be up to the level of the 16,000 square feet for you guys to see. We're just adding that language. So that's kind of like what's missing. And then, with, we had a question from the, that they asked a question about
The restroom.
restroom, relocating the restroom. So, but it doesn't have any utilities, but we don't have any in here that gives, staff the ability to, approve it, that it would have to go back to the planning commission, because for special land uses, in the language, it says, any revisions, move to figure, this figure right here, and, any changes, whatever, look at this to see what happens, well, because it's not in here, we don't have the authority to do it. So we got, it has no utilities that really have to be $3 a bid, we really have to pay, go through all that again, and that kind of.
Mm-hmm. And then a different standard for what they have utilities. Part of the minor site plan approval. Because we need to have the Department of Public Works and Engineering look at anything utility placement. That's it.
Is that then? Everything? Good. All right. That wraps it up for this things and minutes. And now move on to the commission and staff comments.
I got to know about it.
No comment.
No comment.
Any comments, staff, community?
Just for your next meeting on April 7th, we will have a resume. And then today was the deadline for the second meeting in April, and I'll be back to the case report. So more than likely, it'll be figuring my thoughts.
I actually have a vote on it in a second, so vice chair will get your first opportunity to. Oh, no, do you vice chair?
Yeah. We're gonna have an acting chairperson for that meeting.
They all vote for me in, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, with that, at 8:15, the meeting adjourns. Thank you, everyone.